November 1953. A hotel room in New York City. Marilyn Monroe stood in front of the bathroom mirror, mascara running down her face. In her trembling hands, she held a photograph. Just one photograph, but it was enough to destroy everything she'd built. "Where did you get this?" she whispered to the man standing behind her. DiMaggio, not yet her husband but already possessive, looked at the photo over her shoulder. His jaw tightened. "Does it matter? The question is, who else has seen it?" "I don't know. I thought I destroyed all the copies." "Clearly you didn't." The photograph showed Marilyn, but not the Marilyn Monroe the world knew. This was from before the platinum hair, before the fame, before she became the fantasy. In the photo, she was Norma Jean, 20 years old, desperate, and completely naked. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what she was doing in that photo. Who she was with, and where it was taken. "We need to find every copy," Joe said, "and we need to burn them. All of them." "It's too late." Marilyn's voice broke. "If one exists, others exist. And if someone wanted to hurt me, they'd already have released it by now. Then why haven't they? Because they're waiting. Waiting for the right moment. When I'm at my biggest, when I have the most to lose." She looked at Joe's reflection in the mirror. "They're going to destroy me with this, and there's nothing I can do to stop it." But what Marilyn didn't know was that the photograph's journey had only just begun. And the real story of how it went from one print to everywhere would be far stranger and more devastating than she could imagine. The photograph had been taken in 1949. Marilyn, still Norma Jean Baker then, had been broke, desperate, behind on rent. A photographer named Tom Kelly had offered her $50. "It's art," he'd said. "Tasteful. Just for a calendar. Nothing anyone will ever connect to you." She'd needed the money. Needed it so badly that she'd ignored every instinct screaming at her to walk away. So she'd posed, on red velvet, arched back, face turned away from the camera just enough to maintain some anonymity. Tom had promised the photos would be anonymous, that her face would be obscured, that no one would ever know it was her. He'd lied. By 1952, the calendar was selling in gas stations across America. Golden Dreams, it was called. And people were starting to notice that the model looked familiar. Those curves, that skin, that je ne sais quoi that made men stare. Marilyn's studio found out. Executives panicked. This could ruin her. She was supposed to be America's sweetheart. The girl next door with a body that made men forget they had wives. Not a nude model. They'd given her two options. Deny it was her, or admit it and hope the public forgave her. She'd chosen the truth. Sort of. She'd admitted to the calendar shoot but spun it as a story of survival. A struggling actress who'd had no choice, who'd done what she had to do to eat, and miraculously the public had loved her for it. Her honesty, her vulnerability, her refusal to be ashamed. The calendar incident had made her even more famous, more desirable, more Marilyn Monroe. But that photograph, the one she held in the New York hotel room, that was different. That one had never been released. That one Tom Kelly had promised to destroy, because that photograph showed her face, clearly, unmistakably, and it showed more than red velvet and artistic poses. It showed what had happened after the official shoot ended. When Tom had said, "Just a few more, for my private collection," when he'd brought in another model, a man, and asked them to pose together. "It's art," he'd said again. "Just for me. I promise." Norma Jean, naive and trusting, had believed him, had done what he asked, had let herself be photographed in ways that weren't art, that were explicit, sexual, pornographic. And now, 4 years later, someone had that photograph, and they were using it to threaten her. The first demand had come in the mail. No return address, just the photograph and a note. $10,000, or this goes to every newspaper in America. Marilyn had paid. Thought it was over. Then another demand, another copy, another $10,000 and another. She'd paid $50,000 over 6 months. Bled her bank account dry. But the demands kept coming, because there wasn't just one person with copies. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Tom Kelly had made copies, sold them, traded them, given them to friends, and those friends had made more copies. And those copies had been sold to collectors, to studios that wanted leverage over her, to men who wanted to own a piece of Marilyn Monroe that no one else could have. The photograph had taken on a life of its own, like a virus, spreading, multiplying, impossible to contain. And now Joe DiMaggio stood in that hotel room, looking at one of those copies, and said the words that would change everything. "We're going to find every single person who has this photograph, and we're going to destroy them. Joe, we can't." "Yes, we can, and we will." But what Joe didn't understand, what Marilyn was only beginning to realize, was that you can't destroy an image once it's been seen. You can't unring a bell. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. The photograph would always exist, somewhere, in someone's collection, in someone's safe, in someone's memory, and eventually it would surface. Not because someone wanted money, but because some secrets are too big to stay buried. Wait, because the moment when that photograph finally went public would come in the most unexpected way. 9 years after the hotel room confrontation, Marilyn was at the height of her fame and her lowest point personally. Divorced from Joe, divorced from Arthur Miller, struggling with pills, struggling with depression, struggling with the weight of being Marilyn Monroe. She'd thought the photograph threat had ended. The demands had stopped years ago. Maybe everyone who had copies had been paid off. Maybe the photos had been destroyed. Maybe she was finally safe. She was wrong. A gallery in Los Angeles announced an exhibition. The Secret History of Hollywood. Unpublished photographs. Behind-the-scenes moments. Things the studios didn't want the public to see. Marilyn's lawyer called her. "You need to see this. They're planning to display one of your photographs. The one from the Kelly shoot." "Which one?" Silence on the other end. "Which one?" She repeated, her voice rising. "The private one. The one with the male model." "They're calling it The Real Marilyn Monroe." Marilyn's world tilted. "They can't. I'll sue. They claim it's art, that it's historically significant, that the public has a right to see the real you." The real me. That wasn't me. That was a girl who needed $50. A girl who trusted the wrong person. A girl who didn't know she was being exploited. I know. But legally, Tom Kelly owns the copyright to those photos, and he sold them to a collector, who sold them to this gallery, and they have every right to display them. Marilyn hung up, stared at the wall, felt the familiar pull of the pills in her nightstand, the easy escape, the gentle slide into nothing. But then she thought, no, not this time. This time I fight. She called a press conference. Didn't tell her publicist, didn't tell the studio. Just called reporters and said she had something important to say. They showed up, of course. Marilyn Monroe calling an impromptu press conference. That was news. She stood in front of the cameras. No makeup, hair pulled back. Looking older than her 36 years. Looking tired. Looking human. "I'm here to talk about a photograph that's going to be displayed in a gallery next week. A photograph taken of me in 1949 by Tom Kelly. A photograph I've been trying to destroy for 13 years. The reporters leaned forward. Cameras clicked. This was the story they'd been waiting for. That photograph shows me naked, with a man, in explicit poses. And before you ask, yes, I posed for it willingly. I needed money. I was desperate. And Tom Kelly offered me $50 and told me it was art. Told me no one would ever see it. Told me it would be destroyed after he made his sketches. He lied. He kept the photographs. He made copies. He sold them. And for the past 13 years, people have been blackmailing me with them. I've paid tens of thousands of dollars trying to make them disappear, but they won't disappear, because you can't destroy something that people want to see. You can't hide something that people want to find." She paused, took a breath. "So I'm done trying. That photograph is going to be displayed. People are going to see it. And I want you all to know I'm not ashamed. I was young. I was poor. I made a choice. And I survived. That photograph doesn't define me. It's just one moment, one decision, one $50 job that I needed to take to survive. The gallery claims they're showing the real Marilyn Monroe. They're wrong. That photograph shows Norma Jean Baker, a girl who doesn't exist anymore. A girl who had to do things she didn't want to do to become the woman standing in front of you now. So look at it. Share it. Print it in your newspapers. Do whatever you want with it, because I'm taking away your power. The power of shame. The power of secrets. The power of holding something over my head. I am not ashamed of what I did to survive. And if that makes me less marketable, less desirable, less Marilyn Monroe, then so be it. Because I'd rather be honest than perfect." She walked away from the podium. Didn't take questions. Didn't wait for reactions. Just walked away. The next day, the photograph was everywhere. On front pages, in magazines, passed around offices and shared in whispers. Everyone saw it. The thing Marilyn had spent 13 years trying to hide. Her most shameful secret, now public. And the reaction wasn't what anyone expected. People weren't shocked. They were sympathetic. They saw a young woman who'd been exploited, a starlet who'd been taken advantage of by a photographer who'd lied, a human being who'd made a difficult choice. The gallery canceled the exhibition, said they didn't want to participate in the continued exploitation of Marilyn Monroe. Tom Kelly was shamed, called out by other photographers, accused of violating the trust of a vulnerable young woman, his reputation destroyed. And Marilyn? Marilyn became more than a sex symbol. She became a survivor, someone who'd taken control of her narrative, someone who'd refused to be a victim. But that wasn't the end of the photograph's journey. Because once something exists in the world, it takes on a life of its own. The photograph did disappear for a while. After Marilyn's press conference, after the public sympathy, it became taboo to display or share it. Collectors who owned copies hid them away. Publications refused to print it. But then Marilyn died, and everything changed. Within weeks of her death, the photograph resurfaced. Not in mainstream publications, but in underground magazines, in private collections, in the kind of places that trafficked in celebrity exploitation. The photo Marilyn died trying to hide. That was the headline. Completely untrue, but effective. The photograph sold thousands of copies. Made thousands of dollars for people who had nothing to do with taking it, nothing to do with Marilyn's life, nothing to do with her story. It became part of her legend. The secret shame, the hidden past, the thing that proved even Marilyn Monroe had been human, had been vulnerable, had been used. Decades passed. The photograph became more myth than reality. Some people claimed it didn't exist, that it was an urban legend, that Marilyn had made it up to garner sympathy. Others claimed they'd seen it, that it was worse than anyone imagined, that it showed things no one should see. The truth was somewhere in between. The photograph existed. It was explicit, but it wasn't the scandalous bombshell people imagined. It was just sad, just a young woman being exploited by a man she trusted. In the 1990s, a collector tried to auction it, listed it as the lost Marilyn Monroe photograph, expected it to sell for millions. Marilyn's estate sued, said the photograph was an invasion of privacy, that displaying it violated Marilyn's right to control her own image. The court ruled in favor of the estate, said that even though Marilyn was dead, she had a right to dignity, that the photograph represented exploitation, not art, that it should never be publicly displayed again. The collector was forced to destroy his copy. Under court supervision, publicly, the photograph was burned, turned to ash, but of course other copies still existed, hidden in private collections, stored in safe deposit boxes, kept as insurance, as leverage, as proof that even the most famous people had secrets. And then came the internet. And everything that had been hidden became findable. Everything that had been secret became shareable. Everything that had been destroyed became immortal. The photograph surfaced online, on obscure websites, on forums dedicated to celebrity exploitation, on dark corners of the internet where privacy meant nothing and shame was currency. Marilyn's estate tried to remove it, filed takedown notices, threatened legal action. But it was like trying to stop a flood with a bucket. For every copy removed, 10 more appeared. The photograph Marilyn tried to destroy was now everywhere. Shared, downloaded, reposted. A permanent part of internet history, and with it came the story. Marilyn's story. The young woman who'd needed $50, who'd been promised the photos would be destroyed, who'd spent years trying to undo one decision made in desperation. Some people shared the photograph with sympathy. This is why we need to protect vulnerable people. This is what exploitation looks like. Others shared it with cruelty. Even Marilyn Monroe was a whore. Proof that no woman is innocent. Both responses missed the point. The photograph wasn't about sex or morality or innocence. It was about power, about who gets to control the narrative, about who benefits from someone else's vulnerability. Tom Kelly died in 1984, never apologized, never acknowledged the harm he'd caused. Died believing he'd done nothing wrong, that he'd just been a photographer doing his job. That Marilyn should have been grateful for the exposure. The male model in the photograph never came forward, never identified himself, never claimed to be part of Marilyn Monroe's history. Maybe he felt shame. Maybe he didn't want the attention. Maybe he just wanted to forget. But the photograph lived on, passed from person to person, generation to generation. A digital ghost that couldn't be destroyed because destruction no longer meant anything in a world of infinite copies. And somewhere in all of this, Marilyn Monroe, the person, disappeared. Replaced by Marilyn Monroe, the image, the photograph, the legend, the commodity, the thing she'd tried so hard to prevent, becoming nothing but a body, a fantasy, an object, had happened anyway. Despite her press conference, despite her honesty, despite her attempts to take control. Because once you become an image, you stop being human. You become whatever people want you to be, whatever they need you to be, whatever they can profit from. The photograph Marilyn tried to destroy now lives forever. Not because it's important, not because it reveals anything meaningful about her, but because it's proof that even the most famous person is still vulnerable, still exploitable, still human. And that's what people want from celebrities. Not perfection, but proof that they can be brought down, that they suffer, that they hurt. The photograph is everywhere now. But it's also nowhere, because when something becomes that common, it loses meaning. It becomes wallpaper, background noise, just another image in an infinite stream of images. Most people who see it don't even recognize it as Marilyn Monroe. Don't know the story behind it. Don't know about Tom Kelly or the $50 or the 13 years of blackmail. They just see a naked woman in a compromising position from a different era, and they scroll past onto the next image, the next scandal, the next exploitation. And maybe that's the saddest part of all, that the photograph Marilyn tried so hard to destroy, the photograph that caused her so much pain, the photograph that represented her greatest shame, ultimately doesn't matter, because we've seen so much, shared so much, exploited so much. That one woman's vulnerability in 1949 is just a footnote, a curiosity, a piece of trivia about a dead celebrity. The photograph is everywhere. But Marilyn Monroe, the real person, is still nowhere, still misunderstood, still reduced to an image, still trying, even in death, to be seen as human. And that's the real tragedy. Not the photograph itself, but what it represents. The impossibility of controlling your own story once you become public property. The way vulnerability becomes currency. The way private moments become public consumption. Marilyn tried to destroy the photograph, but the photograph destroyed her instead. Not by existing, but by never going away, by always being there, by always being the thing people remembered when they thought of her. Not her acting, not her intelligence, not her kindness or her humor or her humanity. Just the photograph, the thing she did when she was desperate, the thing she regretted, the thing that followed her for 13 years and then forever after her death. The photograph is everywhere now, in books about Marilyn, in documentaries, in online galleries, in private collections, in the collective memory of popular culture. And every time someone shares it, every time someone looks at it, every time someone uses it to prove some point about morality or exploitation or celebrity culture, they're participating in the exact thing Marilyn tried to prevent. They're turning her into an object. A commodity, a thing to be consumed, a lesson to be learned, a cautionary tale about the price of fame, but she was never those things. She was just a person who made a choice when she had no other options, a person who tried to survive in a world that wanted to destroy her, a person who fought and failed and ultimately lost. The photograph tried to destroy her. And in many ways, it succeeded, not because of what it showed, but because of what it represented, the permanent nature of mistakes, the impossibility of redemption, the way the past follows you no matter how fast you run. So think about that the next time you see the photograph, or any photograph like it, any moment of vulnerability turned into entertainment, any private shame made public. Think about the person behind the image, the choices they made, the reasons they made them, the pain of having those choices displayed for the world to judge, because we all have photographs we'd destroy if we could, moments we wish we could erase, decisions we'd take back if given the chance. Marilyn Monroe just had the misfortune of having hers become public property, of having her worst moment become her most famous moment, of having the thing she tried hardest to hide become the thing everyone knows about. We can choose to remember Marilyn Monroe as a person, not as a photograph, not as a commodity, not as a cautionary tale, just as a person who tried, who fought, who survived as long as she could. Who deserved better than to be reduced to one desperate choice made in 1949? That's how we honor her, not by studying the photograph, but by refusing to let it define her, by seeing past the image to the human underneath. Because that's what Marilyn wanted all along, not to destroy the photograph, but to be seen as more than it, to be valued for more than her body, to matter as a person, not just as an object. The photograph is everywhere, but her humanity doesn't have to be lost. Not if we choose to remember it, not if we choose to see her, not if we choose to look past the image to the person. That choice is ours, and it's the only way to finally give Marilyn Monroe what she never got in life: the freedom to be more than the photograph she tried to destroy. So ask yourself, have you ever taken or shared a photo that someone didn't want seen? Have you ever participated in spreading someone's private moment for entertainment or curiosity? Have you ever clicked on something titled leaked or exclusive or never before seen without thinking about the person behind it? We all have. In this digital age, we've all been complicit in turning someone's vulnerability into content, someone's worst moment into our entertainment, someone's private shame into public property. But we can choose differently. We can choose not to click, not to share, not to participate in the commodification of human vulnerability. Think about the photos on your own phone, the moments you've captured. Which ones would destroy you if they became public? Which choices would you take back? Which versions of yourself would you erase if you could? Now imagine those photos everywhere. Imagine strangers analyzing them, judging them, sharing them, profiting from them. Imagine spending your entire life trying to be seen as more than that one frozen moment. That's what Marilyn lived through. That's what countless people live through today. Only now it happens faster, spreads wider, lasts longer. Every time we share someone's private moment, we're making the same choice Tom Kelly made in 1949. We're choosing to exploit vulnerability for our own benefit. We're choosing to value entertainment over empathy. We're choosing to see people as content rather than humans. The photograph Marilyn tried to destroy teaches us that we have power. The power to look away. The power to refuse to participate. The power to see people as more than their worst moments. Social media has made us all publishers. We all decide what spreads and what stops. We all choose what goes viral and what gets ignored. We all have the power to protect people or expose them. So next time you see something leaked or exclusive about someone, a celebrity, a politician, your neighbor, a stranger, pause. Ask yourself, am I participating in someone's attempted destruction? Am I spreading something they tried to bury? Am I turning a human being into an object for my entertainment? Because that's the real lesson of the photograph. Not that secrets always come out, but that we choose what we do with them. We choose whether to spread someone's pain or protect their dignity. We choose whether to see them as human or as content. Marilyn Monroe couldn't stop the photograph from existing, but we can stop it from mattering. We can choose to remember her for her humanity instead of her vulnerability. We can choose to honor her by refusing to reduce anyone else to their worst moment. That's how we break the cycle, not by destroying every compromising photo, but by choosing not to look, not to share, not to participate in the exploitation. By choosing to see people, all people, as more than the images that haunt them.